putting myself in uncomfortable positions. And one such example was to apply and ultimately be selected and speak at the BA conference, which I'd never done before. I knew my material, I knew my content, I'd practiced, I'd rehearsed, and I felt in control. I was worried that nobody was going to show up. I was worried I'd have technical faults. I was worried that people might think I'm a fraud and I shouldn't even be standing there talking to them. I was worried I was going to shake and I might get nervous. I was worried that nobody will ask questions, which is the worst thing that can happen as a presenter. And I went there with the intention of introducing myself to 3 people I didn't know. And I couldn't do it, Tando. I literally couldn't do it. I had some wonderful conversations and I got talking to people in the workshops. And I'm sort of standing on the edge, like I'm back at high school on the dance floor, hanging around the edge. I want to go to talk to people, but I just couldn't do it.
Welcome to Inside Business Analysis. I'm your host, Tanner Jacobs, and today I am joined with Simon Platt. How are you doing today, Simon?
Yeah, I'm very good. Very, very good. Thank you, Tando. Yourself?
Yes, I'm doing good. Excited to have our conversation today. And, the main kind of topic of our conversation today is going to be around how to be a braver business analyst. And that's such an exciting topic for me to get into because I believe a lot of people would take a lot of value out of this conversation. But before we kind of dive into that side of things, can you give a brief introduction into who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, so like I say, my name's Simon Platt. I've been a business analyst now of one description or another for about 17 years. Like a lot of people, not everybody, I kind of just stumbled into it and I made it a career. I've had various roles from junior up to principal, lead, etc., etc. And presently, I'm one of the principal business analysts at Whitbread, who is the parent company of some well-known brands such as Premier Inn, Brewers Fayre, Beefeater, etc., etc. So yeah, I've been there about 18 months and really enjoying it.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. And also many years of experience there under your belt. Has he always been around business analysis, or did you kind of venture off into other related fields?
It's interesting you say that, actually. So I did. I had 2 years as a product owner, an innovation product owner. So I worked for a big automotive financial company, and they were looking at sort of running proof of concepts, pilots, testing technology really, really fast. And they created this inaugural role of a technology product owner. And as you're probably familiar, there's quite a lot of transferable skills between being a BA and a product owner. And I loved it. I thoroughly loved it. I did it for 2 years. But the lure of business analysis, I think I've come to realization now after 17 years, I'm a BA at heart. I'll probably always be a BA. Really, it was really good, actually. I encourage anybody that has an opportunity to explore it because it made me a better business analyst, I think, by those 2 years. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And another thing that you have had is it a nomination or award? You got Business Analyst of the Year finalist 2023.
I did. Yes. I was really proud of that. It was really interesting to be selected. Was generally like a genuine honor to be sort of selected. And I was one of the 8 finalists. Got to meet some incredible people. Big shout out to Pip Hall, who was the winner. But I'd encourage anybody. I'd encourage if the opportunity presents itself to nominate somebody or be involved in that process to really go for it, because I learned a lot about myself. I learned what I'm good at. I learned maybe where I'm a little bit short and where I can improve in the next year, and so on and so forth. But really good experience.
And where do you go for that? Is that which company or organization runs that?
Yeah, so it's SysKD sort of promote it, and so there's usually a call to action. I can't remember now, somewhere like April, May, where nominations are open, and there's an application form. And in my instance, it was giving examples of where you've had to deal with ambiguity as a business analyst, give examples of where you've contributed to the BA community, examples of like personal development and growth. You complete a submission. You then need to have that, I guess, verified, or you need somebody to sign off on it, like a line manager or somebody to make sure you're not making it up. And then you go into a selection process, and there's a panel of judges, and then the finalists, and then ultimately the winner gets announced at the BA conference. And also, it's a wonderful process, and you get free entry to the full 3 days at the conference. So there's that as well that comes
Ah,
with it, which was
yeah.
incredible. I loved the conference. It was an amazing 3 days. So that was just a cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. And at the conference, you then did a talk, right, on the topic of fear kills more dreams than failure ever will, and then semicolon how to become a braver business analyst. So could you just kind of explain, first of all, what inspired you to talk on that topic?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the topic with the longest title at the conference. I think I really put that character limit to the test when I submitted it. Yeah, no, in terms of inspiration, I'd always wanted to give some context. In my personal life, I've always pushed myself outside my comfort zone without even thinking about it. I've really pushed myself. Typically, that's in the form of endurance challenges. So
Okay.
hiking, running, walking, cycling combination, and it just comes naturally to me. And there was a point in my career, probably during the pandemic, when you sort of reflect, and I thought, am I really pushing myself in a professional capacity? Am I really stepping outside my comfort zone? And the answer, to be quite frank, was no. So it's like, okay, well,
Mm,
how do I correct that? And one of the ways was putting myself in uncomfortable positions. And one such example was to apply and ultimately be selected and speak at the BA conference, which I'd never done before, never spoken publicly before. I've done lots of internal presentations, but never externally. And this idea about being brave is something that just was percolating around in my head. And I've got various examples of where I've been brave and pushed myself. And I just thought, I can talk to this. Like, this is a subject where I feel like I can talk to it from real world experience. And we may touch on this, but even leading up to the presentation, effectively, I did a case study on myself. I experimented on myself where 6 months leading up to the conference, very deliberately, very consciously put myself in these uncomfortable situations to see if my fears came true, to see how I grow and developed as a person, as a business analyst. So yeah, it was really an interesting, eye-opening experience, and effectively, yeah, a case study on myself about how far can I push myself to be bolder and braver as a person and as a business analyst.
mm. So, in your own words, then,
Yeah,
how would you define or describe what a brave business analyst is?
yeah, it's a really good question about what does it mean to actually be brave. And there are lots of definitions, but something that really resonates with me is to be brave. First, you have to recognize that there is a situation or something that makes you fearful or makes you worry or makes you anxious, and doing it regardless. So an example could be, as business analysts, sometimes we have to have difficult conversations with people. We might have to have a difficult conversation with our line manager or a direct report or a team member or a stakeholder. And sometimes that difficult conversation might worry us. It might make us fearful. How's that person going to react? Is it going to negatively affect our working relationship? And some people may avoid that conversation. Bravery is recognizing that's a difficult conversation, and I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. Another example as BAs may be, and I've done lots of this to varying successes, but trying a new tool or technique. We've all got a toolbox of tools and techniques, but trying something different, trying a different angle, trying something different, and recognizing it may not work, but do it anyway because it might work and you may have wonderful success. Or even if it doesn't work, okay, you learn from it. What can you learn and take again, really? So yeah, I guess ultimately it's to be brave is to recognize that there's a situation that makes you fearful or worried or anxious and pushing on regardless.
Just going for it anyway,
Go for
effectively,
it.
no matter that fear. So you spoke about these case studies or
Yeah.
self-awareness tests that you did. What were those?
I did lots. So if anybody's
Yeah.
interested, I wrote about some of these on a blog that I created called the Alternative BA blog, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. I probably did about 50 in all. And at the conference, I
Wow.
shared 30 of them. Yeah. So some examples were, like I said, just trying a new tool or technique. Some of them was sort of stepping outside my comfort zone in my personal life. So I did various endurance challenges at really short notice, etc., to just test my mental resilience. Like, can I overcome adversity if I'm put into a difficult situation? Um, I said no to opportunities on a matter of a principle. So there's examples in the workplace where I was presented with opportunities that I really wanted to do, but as a matter of principle, it conflicted with me. So I said no, and I didn't just say no. I gave my reasons for it. Um, I presented at the conference like I spoke about. A really good one was I asked a question of somebody very senior where I was certain the answer was going to be no, and I asked it anyway. And the answer actually turned out to be yes, which was a massive learning curve for
Mm.
me. A whole bunch of stuff. I've been very open about the fact that I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is something I would
Mm.
have always masked previously in the workplace, but I've been a lot more vocal, a little bit more open about it, in the
Mm.
hope that it might encourage and inspire others. So yeah, there's lots of, like I said, there are about 40 or 50 in all, but that's a very broad flavor of some of the ones that I did. And last but not least, sorry, before I forget, karaoke as well.
Aha,
So
lovely.
anybody, go on, sorry.
No, no, go for it.
I was going to say, anybody listening that was at the BA conference that came to my talk will realize it was a bit of a running joke, but karaoke was the epitome of my comfort zone challenge, where it was something I wanted to do my entire life. I've avoided it because of just the dread and the fear and the worry. And at the BA party at the conference, the opportunity was there. And on impulse, I just went for it. And it was an incredible feeling. And it was
Mm.
everything I thought it was going to be. Yeah, it was a nice way to kind of bookends that conference experience for me by doing something that I had dreaded for as long as I can remember. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. I love that. And it takes a lot of courage, I'd say, to put yourself in these positions deliberately, because it sounds like that's what you did. You didn't kind of wait for uncomfortable positions to come and then feel like, okay, let me be brave. It almost feels like you put yourself in those positions deliberately to almost test your bravery and figure out where your limits are, so to speak. And in any of these case studies and tests that you did, were there any times where you kind of felt like, okay, I've this is my limit, or this is
Yeah.
too much for me?
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, so I gave an example. So there were things at the time that I hadn't done that I tried to do, and so some of the things that I struggle with is, I'm trying to think of the word here, sort of intimacy, and by that I mean professional intimacy. I've always been very. I'm not saying this is right, by the way, or wrong, but I've always sort of separated. This is the personal Simon that goes home every day, and this is the one that you see at work. And I think over the pandemic, those are for better are sort of blurred a little bit more. But I've always found it difficult to have personal relationships in a professional capacity. And a really good example of this was the BA Managers Forum. You familiar with the BAMF, Tando?
I've I've heard of it. I've
Yep.
never actually been there to any of the events or anything like that. So it's probably worthwhile just kind of explaining briefly what that is.
Yeah, to give some context, the BA Managers Forum happens twice a year. It's organised by SysKD. It's a one-day event. It's almost like a mini conference where you get various people across the industry will come. There'll be workshops. There'll be special interest groups, etc. And it's an opportunity to learn and connect with people from the BA community. I went to my first one September last year, and it's the first time I'd really been in a network and social event since the pandemic, and I
Mm,
struggled. Like I generally
right.
struggled. I learned a lot from it, but the social interaction I struggled with, and I left, and I was exhausted. My social battery was just absolutely drained. So then I got the opportunity to go July this year, and as part of my comfort zone challenge, I said, right, I'm gonna. Well, originally I declined because I had this negative experience, and I thought, no, no, no,
Yeah.
like I'm putting my if I'm going to live and breathe my comfort zone challenge, I need to face it. So I managed to get a +1 at short notice, and I went there with the intention of introducing myself to three people I didn't know. And it's
Right.
worth saying I love people, I love conversation, but I struggle to be the initiator when I don't know somebody. I
Mm.
think I'm worried about being rejected or whatever. And I couldn't do it, Tando. I literally couldn't do it. I had some wonderful conversations and I got talking to people in the workshops, but I felt like a school kid again because when we broke for the sort of lunch and that, you imagine you've got this big hall, there's all these buffet food, there's lots of noise, and I'm sort of standing on the edge, like I'm back at high school on the dance floor, hanging around the edge.
Mm.
Just I want to go to talk to people, but I just couldn't do it. And
Right.
that's an example of it's a long answer to your question, but it's an example of where I very consciously try to overcome a constraint that I have on myself, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, and who knows? There's another band coming up soon, so maybe I'll make progress at that one. But yeah, I still struggle with that element of it.
Interesting. Interesting how you, yeah. So you went to this BA Managers Forum event, struggled to network with three people. That was a challenge.
Yep.
But then on the flip side of that, you still did a talk at the business analysis conference.
The reason that by comparison presenting to an audience of, I think maybe there was 70, 80 people in my talk
Right.
was because I was in control, if that makes
Okay.
sense. I knew my material, I knew my content, I'd practiced, I'd rehearsed, and I felt in control because ultimately everybody there is chosen to, and I'm incredibly grateful for it, but everybody chose to come and listen to me. They could have gone to one of 4 other sessions. They came to me to listen to me. So that gives me the confidence to say, I know my stuff, I know my material. These people have chosen to be here. Fantastic. The thing about the BAMP, for example, for me anyway, and it's different for everybody, it's the fear of rejection. It sounds weird and people may not understand it, but it's the idea of walking up to somebody and saying, hi, I'm Simon. Like, how do you do?
Mm,
Very alien to me. Doesn't come naturally.
mm,
Someone comes up to me, no problem.
mm.
I can chat and talk to the cows come home. It's that initial broken. But yeah, by comparison, stand up and presenting to 70, 80 people was a lot more comfortable for me. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is really interesting. To be fair, I've met people who've pretty much said exactly the same thing as you've said, which is that the idea of networking, especially in person, is scary to them,
Mhm.
which you wouldn't think it is for business analysts, but actually it is. And I don't know why that is. I mean, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I can only speak from personal experience. For me,
Mm,
and I want to prefix this by saying there's no right or wrong. It's a lot to do with preferences. A lot of preferences, introvert, extrovert, etc. I mean, that's probably too broad, but I'm a big believer in, for example, things like Myers Briggs. I don't know if you're familiar with Myers Briggs. I find it an incredibly powerful tool in terms of understanding who I am, what my preferences are, that then help me better appreciate other people's preferences and where we've got common ground and where maybe we don't. And yeah, I don't have the answer. I personally find in my day job, I have no problem interacting. Again, I love people, I love interaction, I love conversations. I've
exactly. Yeah.
zero constraints connecting with stakeholders. It's probably a strength. I don't know. It's that I don't know. It's struggling to articulate. I think when you're at a networking event, it's maybe the unknown. How's this person going to
Mm,
respond? Are they going to just ignore
mm,
me? Am I going to struggle to make small talk? But
mm.
I'm getting better at it. By the end of the conference,
Yeah.
I was a little social butterfly moving around chatting to people. So
Yeah.
definitely got better by the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. No, brilliant, brilliant. So you'd mentioned as well that you got some experiments that you want to go through with me as a role play.
Mm.
So let's get into that.
Yeah. So during my talk, I had a couple of thought experiments. To test this idea. And one of them revolved around this idea that sometimes the reason people are fearful is because they're worried about the worst that can happen. They're fearful of what might happen and it constrains them. They sort of put these self-imposed limitations on them. And rightly or wrongly, and it'd be good to have this, get your view on this as well. Sometimes I believe that success and failure is a matter of personal perception. Yeah, it's a matter of personal perception, and it's unique to each of us. And just very quickly to give an example, is if we take running, like I want to try and run 5 kilometers in 20 minutes. And if I do that, it'll be a lifetime best. For somebody else, 20 minutes is a bad day. They can do it 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. For somebody else, the idea of running 5 kilometers is completely unrealistic. feels too big for them, and maybe it's 4 kilometers or 3 or 2 or 1. And every one of those successes are successes because they're personal to us as individuals. And therefore, I think sometimes we're worried about failure or people perceiving us to fail. So the thought experiment that I did, and let's do it, you, Tando, is so imagine that you are studying towards your BA diploma or your advanced BA diploma, okay? And you'll probably be familiar. You've got lots of modules that make up the diploma and advanced BA diploma. Now imagine you're doing a module that is really difficult for you. Data analytics, business finance, stakeholder engagement, whatever it may be. It's a subject you find really, really difficult. However, during the course of your studies, you get new tools, new techniques, newfound confidence. You learn a lot more than you previously know about this subject. However, and there's no right or wrong here, Tando, it's a thought experiment. However, despite learning lots, when you come to take your exam, you are a single mark short of the pass mark. Now, the question I pose the audience and the question I pose you is, did you fail or did you succeed?
Wow. Oh my goodness. Without overthinking it, I would say I failed.
Mm-hmm. And again, no right or wrong. So I've done this 3 times now, and I've had a 80-20 in terms of pass failure. I've had a 60-40, and I've had a 55-45. So the majority has always been to failure, but by how much has been different. And I was quite mischievous because when I did this at a conference, the scenario is based on a real world example. So I failed my business finance exam in March. I failed it by a single mark. I got 25 out of 40 when I needed 26. So I recognize, absolutely, I failed. By the definition of the exam, I failed. However, it's a matter of opinion. I also consider a degree of success because business finance, for me, incredibly difficult. I chose it because it was difficult. If I just wanted to pass an exam, I'd have done something else. But I wanted to learn. And I did learn. I can't remember what I got on the mock, but I increased my knowledge sort of to threefold. So,
Right.
so it's not always black or white. It's not always obvious success and failure. And I think it's sometimes worth just recognizing that we can sometimes beat ourselves up too much with this idea that we failed. And there's lots of variations on this quote, but often failure is just a first unsuccessful attempt towards success. It's just a stepping stone.
Yeah.
It's not the end state.
Yeah.
It's only the end state if you just give up. If you go again, it's just your first attempt towards success. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of, because I've had a few chats with some business analysts who say that sometimes when they come out of a workshop, they're just like, my goodness, that tanked. It was so rubbish. It just, and they in that moment they start to feel like, well, I failed because maybe I didn't get the requirements, maybe I didn't understand the problem, maybe we didn't get to some sort of consensus about what we're doing on this project, and that scenario would make people feel like, okay, you know what, I definitely failed in that position. But what you're saying is, it just depends on your perception. It sounds like.
It depends on your perception. It depends also how you define success. Like,
Right.
if you go into a workshop and you say, right, definition of success is we walk away and all the requirements are approved. First of all, you need to ask yourself, is that realistic? Is that a realistic going into that? Because I've seen it before where sometimes less experience is, if you're giving yourself an hour to go through, 50 requirements, just do the maths. That's not going to happen. So I think it's is the objective you set in that workshop or that meeting or whatever, is it realistic and is it attainable? And then not to be too hard on yourself if you don't achieve it, because there could be great reasons for it. You get new information you didn't have before. Something, so yeah, I think it's really considering about the objectives and whether they are realistic, whether they're attainable, and not beating yourself up if you don't hit them all the time. Learn from it. I mean, I've done it loads of times. I'm much better now at estimating how long it's going to take me to do a piece of work because I've learned the hard way, because I've got it wrong in the past. So yeah.
Yeah. No, very, very good point there. And then you had a second experiment for us, which was to test comfortable levels and uncomfortable levels. Can you talk through us?
Yes, I like this one. So it's worth recognizing that, we talked about being brave. But being brave again is different to different people, because to be brave, you need to face your fears, but something that I might be scared of, you may not, Tando. Like I gave the example of networking. You that may be just water off a duck's back to you. So I think it's really important that we recognize that comfort zones are unique to each of us, they're unique to our colleagues and our peers and our line managers and our stakeholders, etc. So therefore, bravery is quite unique to us because it depends on what makes us fearful. And I really like this experiment because I've had a real mix of results whenever I've done this, which I find fascinating.
Right.
So,
Right.
so anyone, people listen as well can play along. So I'm going to give you 5 scenarios. Ignore the order I give them to you. They're just how they come to me. And what I'm going to ask you to do is put them in order of how far they are from your comfort zone. So I'll read them out first. And so we've got presenting at the BA conference, deleting 1,000 unread emails, performing karaoke in front of a live audience, introducing yourself to 3 strangers at a social networking event, or doing a tandem skydive. Okay. So hypothetically, if presenting at a conference is the thing that makes you most scared, that would be number 1. If you're most comfortable doing karaoke, that would be number 5. So I'd love to know what your sequence would be.
Okay, I'm not going to overthink this.
Okay, go for it.
I'm going to say karaoke number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, karaoke number 1, and then I'm going to say deleting unread emails. That sounds like that sounds scary. My goodness, I don't even know what I'm deleting. So that's number 2. Number 3, I'm probably going to say I'm actually probably going to say the presenting at the BA conference actually.
Yep.
And number 4, skydive, and then number 5, introduce myself to 3 people. There you go. That's my initial thought as of right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So when I did mine, karaoke was the thing for me that terrified me most. Then it was introducing myself to 3 strangers, which we've already alluded to. Then it was presented at the conference. Then it was a tandem skydive, and then it was deleting 1,000 unread emails. And the 1,000 unread emails is a really interesting one because I've seen some people where it literally makes their skin crawl, just the idea of deleting 1,000 unread emails. But, I've done that. I've done it multiple times. Yeah. I wrote a blog post on it. There's a story behind it. It's not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but it's
right.
It was more about the culture of my preference is to talk. Let's talk. Let's communicate on Teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but interesting. I did this with a group of colleagues at Whitbread last week, and deleting 1,000 unread emails was top. And the thing that they were most comfortable with as a group of 9 was skydiving, which I just found like a wonderful sort of juxtaposition. Yeah. So I've done this multiple times and I always get mixed results, which in itself is a wonderful example that comfort zones are unique to each of us. So therefore, being brave is very different to us. And another example I give is in the workplace, like some people are really comfortable putting their hand up, asking a question, offering a different opinion. Whereas for other people, that can take courage and takes bravery. And I think sometimes we have to recognize that and give that encouragement, give that reward to encourage people to keep doing it. Yeah. So, well, thanks for playing along, Tando. I enjoyed that. I'm always interested by people's rankings.
No, thank you for helping me, I guess, face my fears and acknowledge them to kind of figure out what they are. But I'll probably say, a really good maybe takeaway from this would be for those listening to think about the work scenarios that they face maybe on a day-to-day basis that always makes them uncomfortable, and really take a moment to then think about how do I address that. Do you have any tips on identifying what those are and what that first step is once you kind of know, okay, you just alluded to it, that for example, being uncomfortable with speaking up in a meeting or with challenging, say, a senior stakeholder, what's that first step to kind of get us to be brave, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think first of all is acknowledging that it's okay to be fearful. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely fine. It's a natural human response. It's what informs our flight and our fight and our freeze. What I found useful, and I did this ahead of the conference, but I actually wrote down What am I fearful about? What am I worried about
Mm.
presenting at the conference? And I've got it to the side here. And these are all legitimate. I was worried that nobody was going to show up. I was
Mm.
worried I'd have technical faults. I was worried that people might think I'm a fraud and I shouldn't even be standing there talking to them. I was worried I was going to shake and I might get nervous. I was worried that nobody will ask questions, which is the worst thing
Yeah.
that can happen as a presenter. And I wrote all of these down and I tried to rationalize it in my head. And I kind of said, well, what is the likelihood of this happening? And if it does happen, so what? Like,
Mm.
I'm being a bit flippant about that, but if I have a technical problem when I come to play a video, so what? I don't get to play a
Mm.
2-minute video. I'll move on. Maybe I get a little bit nervous and I stumble. So what? I'm in a friendly
Mm.
environment with a room full of people that want to listen to me and want me to succeed. They'll be empathetic to me. And I think sometimes our fears, we can turn them into excuses. So everything that I read
Right.
off there, that's an excuse. And my whole journey up to the conference, just as an example of presenting, was every time these would manifest in my head, and I said to myself, I'm looking for a way out. I'm getting nervous, and I could turn any one of those into an excuse and say I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm a bit nervous. I'm not going to do it. But again, that's where bravery comes in. It's just to recognize that it makes you uncomfortable, but the likelihood of something going wrong, remote, and if it does, so what is really the worst that's going to happen? And I think the more you do that, you come to realize that the things that you're fearful of, those fears don't really become reality, and you'll probably find you enjoy
Mm.
it. You get a sense of satisfaction of overcoming something you may be nervous on. So that would be my advice: is to rationalize it. Think about what's limiting you, rationalize it, and then just go for it and start small as well. You don't have to go big and present at conferences. Just start small and go from there. Build that confidence up over time.
I love that. I love that. And I think in our world, in the business analysis space, it's very, very interesting with the BAs that I've networked with on LinkedIn or in events and things like that. It's always interesting to me how many BAs have I don't know if it's a fear or if it's an excuse, to use kind of what you just mentioned there, around doing something outside of their day job, but in the BA space. Whether that is posting on LinkedIn, writing a blog, being on a podcast, doing a talk, whether it's a webinar or in person, all of these other things that they could do in the BA space, they kind of have a fear around that, or just kind of this, I'm not sure. This makes me uncomfortable, and I've always found that really interesting because I don't know. Maybe I've always just assumed that with the kind of roles that we have, we I guess on paper, we challenge stakeholders. We work with different stakeholders on different levels of the organization. We kind of go from project to project, and it's a role that automatically, I guess, calls you to be brave at some level. But it feels as if when you start to put that same person in an environment where they're doing it something by themselves, the fear factor comes in, even though it's still in the world of business analysis. And I just find that really interesting when I have these conversations
Hmm.
with them.
Can I ask you a question? So obviously
Yeah,
you're hosting a podcast, right? So
right.
was that just water off a duck's back to you, or did that come with with some anxiety, some worry that required bravery? Like,
I think I think definitely came with some anxieties. There's always some anxieties, especially with something like this, which it's very out there.
mhm,
It's something it's almost like screaming from the rooftops, "Hey, everyone, I've got a podcast," sort of thing. And then the anxieties come in the sense of like, okay, what if no one listens to it?
mhm,
What if people don't find value in it? What if there's no real engagement from it? What if I do it, and this kind of links back to the bit that you were talking about earlier about failure. What if I do it and it doesn't take off or whatever, and then I'll stop doing it, say 3 months later? At that point, I would feel like a failure, but it's doubled that feeling because it's not something that I did privately. It's something that I did
yeah, yeah.
sort of publicly in the world. Everyone could see it on my LinkedIn. And if I stopped posting about the podcast, someone might be like, what happened to that podcast then? Type of
Yeah.
thing. And that's like a very public thing. So I won't be saying that the anxieties were 100% there. And they're still
Yeah.
there even today, actually, now that I think about it.
But the great thing is, though, and I mean, it's generally, but you're doing it, right? So you're doing it, and one thing somebody said to me once that stuck with me forever is, let's say you're presenting to 100 people, or you're doing a podcast to 100 people, whatever it may be, they're listening to what you have to say. You're never going to reach 100 people, right? In a room full of 100 people, there's going to be certain people who just don't connect with your message or whatever, and that's absolutely fine. Someone said to me once, even if you connect with one person out of 100, one person comes away from listening to an episode, listening to you talk, and they go away and take a different course of action, you don't know how far that goes, right? You don't know the impact that you may have had just on one person that does something different. You may be completely oblivious to it. You may never ever know that somebody takes something away from an episode or from a presentation, and they go and do something different, and they have a positive impact on their personal, professional life. You don't know how far that goes, and that's always stuck with me. It's, you've only sometimes got to connect with one person. I'm taking it to an extreme here, but you make one connection, you inspire one person, that can go a long way. That can go a long, long way. And that gives me the confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does, because I've been that one person
Yeah.
actually. Well, obviously, I don't know if other people had received something, but I've been that person in the crowd, in a talk or on a webinar, and I'm like, this person is giving me exactly what I wanted or what I needed to hear and to learn. And I've been that person that's then gone and done something differently with my career or in my role. And I'm I'll be honest, I probably haven't gone back to them and said, your talk has helped me kind of
Mhm.
situation. But I've been on the receiving end of that. So I definitely understand what you're saying there. Um, just a final thought, Simon. So
Yeah.
you touched on this very, very early on around you having ADHD.
Mhm.
And the question I wanted to ask you around that is, I'm really thinking about, say, somebody else who's listening to this who has got ADHD themselves, but they see it as a barrier or something to hide or something to mask. What would you say to them?
Wow, it's a really good question. So it's a really good question. So it depends on the individual and their circumstance. I mean, I'm middle aged now, and whilst always suspected, I only had my diagnosis quite late in life. So my approach has been to be quite open about it. So I've had to educate myself on what it is, on sort of even on a chemical, what's happening in my brain, and why some of my behaviors and so on and so forth. So first and foremost, it's educate myself so I could better understand it, because how can I expect other people to understand it if I don't even understand it properly? So I spent a good 6 months just trying to educate myself on it. And there's some wonderful resources on there. A particular favorite of mine is How to ADHD by a lady called Jessica McCabe. Incredible. Like, that was just a real eye opener for me. So educate myself. And then I think it's personal to everybody. It's if you want to tell other people, and then how you do it. So I'll just talk from my personal experience, because if you met one person with ADHD, you've just met one person with ADHD. But when I felt the time was right, I told my line manager probably about 6 months ago, and I shared some videos to say, look, this is what's happening. This is maybe what sometimes I struggle with motivation, I struggle with administrative tasks, but also this is how you can get the best out of me, etc. And I shared it, and then I had a very frank conversation and said, look, this doesn't change anything. I'm still me. I'm still the high performer that I am, but this maybe helps you understand a little bit why I have certain preferences, and I will excel in certain environments and struggle in other, really. So, but again, that took me, I couldn't have had that conversation 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because I didn't understand it myself. And it was through the pandemic that I realized what I was doing was masking. I think the pandemic for a lot of people stripped away those sort of subconscious mechanisms to mask it. Whereas now I'm like, this is me. It makes me who I am. It makes me the business analyst that I am, and and I embrace it, and I love it. For all of the drawbacks, I wouldn't change a thing about it, really. So, bit of a long answer there, but yeah, like, understand it, educate yourself on it, and then yeah.
Yeah, no, it's it's really, really great, because I think it's something that, I mean, it's not that I look for it, but you're the only business analyst who I've come across on LinkedIn who is very open about it. It's even on your bio kind of situation. I think that's a powerful thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
It's okay.
So Simon, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today. Time has flown by, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and also the tests that you've put me through to kind of understand my fears myself, and it's been really insightful. Before we kind of close off this conversation, for those who are listening to this, I would love to connect with you for whether they want to pick your brain about anything that we've spoken about today, or maybe even just kind of connect with you. What's the best place for them to do that?
So LinkedIn is the obvious one. So Simon Platt, you'll find me on LinkedIn. If you're interested, some of the comfort zone challenge that I spoke about, I again, this was me stepping outside my comfort zone. I launched a blog where I wrote about some of those. So testing my own memory now. You can find that at www.alternativebablog.com. And you can read about some of the comfort zone challenge a little bit more detail.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that sounds great. That sounds great. We'll definitely put the links in the show notes for that as well. So I'm glad to hear that. And then in closing, if there is one food for thought that you want to leave the listeners based on what we've spoken about today, what would that be?
One food for thought. I would say if there is something that you are a little bit nervous about, worried about, give it a go and just lean into it and just try. Start small because you don't know where it will take you. I've had some wonderful opportunities opened up to me that I could never have planned for or foreseen because I stepped out of my comfort zone. And one thing has just organically led to another. And I'm really enjoying it. So just give it a try and see what happens.
Love that. Love that. Once again, Simon, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It has been a pleasure having a chat with you today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tand. I really appreciate it. It was good to, I really appreciate you having me on.